Hi, and welcome to Philosophy with Phil, with me, Phil Cohen. For this video, we'll talk about identity. It's the fourth in a series where we started talking about fairness and justice and equality. And at the end of the equality video, I started to talk a little bit about identity, and I'd like to pick up from where we left off there. I'll start with a health warning, if I may, to say that please, nothing that I'm saying in this video is meant to cause offence. I know the subject of identity is quite by its very nature, is a deeply personal one. So please, if you have anything you'd like to share with me, you'd like to disagree or discuss with me, please put it in the comment section below. But it is meant not to cause any degree of offence through anything that's said on this video, please. But I will say that the people that I have spoken to and the arguments I've heard do have inconsistencies, do have disparities. And the people that give them will sometimes reluctantly acknowledge that. And I want to address two of those today. Firstly, the conflict we have as human beings between the needs as an individual versus the needs of the community. We as human beings have an imperative to express our individuality. We do that through the way we dress, through the way we groom ourselves, through the way we behave, through the things we do with our spare time, through the way we react with other people, the way we entertain ourselves, and so on. Although, as you might jokingly observe, it's a mathematical, statistical reality that on average, most of us are average. We have this need to see ourselves as being different from those around us in some way. However, we also have a need to blend in with and to be a part of a community of like-minded others. It gives us a sense of security. It gives us a sense of meaning. It gives us the social interactions that we get through being with people that share a similar point of view. And it could be that that's a religious outlook, and we find that Jewish people tend to mix with Jewish people. That's well known. But it could be more mundane in terms of hobbies. So supporters of a particular football team will hang out together, and people that do a particular hobby will hang out together. We like to be around people that we share, that we have common interest with, be it on a behavioural way or an intellectual way or whatever. We like to be part of that. We like to blend in, and you can see how those two ideas come in conflict. On the one hand, I have a perception of myself as an individual, but on the other, I have this need to sort of be part of a community and have people see me in a particular way. And that creates a conflict that comes up a lot when we discuss identity. We have the issue of bias, for example, where we as human beings naturally categorize the information around us, what we observe. And we do that for things, but we also do that for people as well. And we'll automatically put people in a particular category and assign them characteristics based on things we know about other people that behave in a similar sort of way. And you can see where that can get you into trouble. The second issue I'd like to address is this idea of, I guess, what you could call genetic determinism. This idea that a particular identity is somehow genetically coded. And the more the evidence is that an identity is inherent in our genes and is something that we're born with, the stronger that identity becomes. Now, that's just the first part. Secondly, where that comes into conflict is the idea that we are responsible agents of our own free will. We have freedom of expression. We have a freedom of determination. We are sentient, cognitive, free-thinking human beings with the freedom to say and do what we want. But how can you be a free, expressive human being if your identity, if what you're about to express is pre-programmed and hardwired into your DNA? You can't have it both ways. But yet there seems to be this imperative to define identities in terms of genetics. And when I speak to eminent geneticists, including my old genetics professors, they would repeatedly remind me that behaviour cannot be determined by your genes. It's by your upbringing. When it comes to nature and nurture, we need to get that distinction clear. We can't just let people behave as they like and then say, well, it's just down to the way they were, the way their genes are programmed, the way they are programmed to behave. Doesn't work like that. In fact, Judaism, that is absolutely antithetical to the way to Judaism, because that takes away, like I said earlier, the idea of human free will, of human of human agency. What you might say to me is, hey, but wait a minute. We see in the Torah time and time again this idea put across that whenever a new person is introduced, they're often introduced in terms of their pedigree, in terms of who their parents were. Why should their parents matter if they are a free agent? We often see civilizations introduced as being of a certain predisposition. Where's the free will in that? So I'll give you 3 reasons why we have exceptions. Firstly, I'll start with me. I'm a Cohen. My surname's Cohen, and I am descended from Aaron the Cohen, the very first Cohen. And because of that, people of my family, of my paternal family, in Jewish law, are treated with a slight degree of increased respect, a higher level of respect than regular Jews who aren't. Not a lot. And you could say, well, why should we be treated any differently from anyone else? It's just down to our genes. Well, it's not like that. The descendants of Aaron were chosen to serve in the temple, or the tabernacle as it was in the Bible, in the Torah. And it's because of that we are given that extra level of kedusha, if you like, of holiness. So when people show respect to Kohanim, to descendants of Aaron, they're not showing descendants to those people. They're showing respect to God, because these are people that serve and do God's bidding in the temple. Please God, it should be seen. When people in the Torah are introduced by their parents, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, the reason for doing that is not to say this person was automatically behaved in the way they do because their parents were the way they were, but quite the opposite. To give credit to the parents, to show that this person gave what we call in Yiddish nachas to their parents because they behaved in a particular way, because of their upbringing, because of the way those parents contributed to that child's, that adult's way of thinking and behaviour. Lastly, yes, we do see civilizations identified with a particular character trait. But then we see that around us. We see civilization, we see cities, we see townspeople, we see people with a particular culture. And we see that endemic, certainly nowadays with the media. But then at those times where you had a much closer relationship between the leadership and the townsfolk, you did see pockets of different people with a different outlook on life. Be that more defensive, more aggressive, more friendly, more outward. And so it's easy to see how that can trickle through to the general populace. Not to say that every single person behaves in the same way, but to say that there is a sort of generic culture there that one needs to be conscious of. I'd like to end with two points really to address this issue. One is to say what we need to watch out for. What we need to watch out for is this imperative, this outlook, this point of view, where the way we define an identity is to either A, raise that identity up, and we see this with racism, black supremacy, white supremacy, and so on, or alternatively to denigrate even themselves or other people. And we see this with the sort of victimhood, persecuted mentality. And the problem becomes when you start sort of categorizing the different identities and trying to prioritize one over another and saying one is more denigrated than the other, one has been more persecuted than the other, and one therefore needs to be redressed more than another. That gets you into very dangerous territory. It also, I should say as a side point, becomes, you have to be cautious of, I should say, is with the idea of identity politics, where you can have a very justified, a very noble movement. Take, for example, like Black Lives Matter. Who could disagree with the idea of anti-racism? But with identity politics, what you then do is then there is a political agenda that need not necessarily be related to the original driving force, the original visions and values of that movement, that is then tacked onto that. And the two are sort of, one piggybacks off the other. And so you are then faced with a massive movement that has ideas that you may not agree with. But it's not because you disagree with the core values of the movement. It's because you disagree with the political dimension that has been bolted onto that. The idea of victimhood, either where you're victimizing yourself, putting yourself down, goes against Judaism. We don't do that. We wouldn't have got through the history that we have if we had. Our idea is about seeing the dignity in those around us, seeing the similarities that we share with those around us, all as creatures, as creations of God. That way, we can emphasize the similarities. And this is what Martin Luther King talked about in his speech, about seeing people as being equal, not seeing the differences between people of black skin or people of other colours skin, but judging people and learning from people based on what they can teach you, what they can show you. I'll end with talking about the encounters that we have in next week's Sedra between Jacob and Esau. It's easy to forget that Jacob and Esau were twins. Okay, so when we talk about determinism, you couldn't get more genetically identical than that. And yet they both went off in two very different ways. Although I should point out, the Torah doesn't specifically say that Esau was in any way bad or wicked. It's just he was different. And yet in the two encounters that we have, one between Jacob and Esau himself, and the other with Jacob and the famously enigmatic encounter with his, Rashi describes as guardian angel, in both times, the word used to describe the encounter is to be an embrace. Jacob understood that Esau exists and that he would always be his arch nemesis. But he learned to live with it, to embrace it, to find out more about it. And in some ways, perhaps, yes, even encourage it and challenge it. Thank you for watching. Shabbat Shalom.